Hey, Thomas here. 3 years have passed since Natalie and I divorced. It wasn't a dramatic split, but it wasn't clean either. We didn't tear each other apart, but we didn't exactly part as best friends. It felt like the right thing to do, though. Neither of us wanted to keep pretending, so we agreed it was time. No court battles. No big fights. Just an acknowledgement that we were better off apart. Since the divorce, we've shared custody of the girls. It's been relatively smooth, at least in terms of logistics. We agreed on a schedule where I have them on weekends and she has them during the week. The 45-minute drive between our homes isn't ideal, but it works. We've both made it manageable, prioritizing the girls' needs. I can't say it's always easy, but we've kept the drama out of it, at least for their sake. The girls are 6 and 8 now, and they've adjusted better than I expected. I sometimes wonder if they truly understand what happened, or if it's just something they've gotten used to. They seem okay with it, though. They go to school, they play with their friends, they go to dance class or soccer practice. Everything's pretty much the same for them, just in 2 different homes. We've tried hard to make sure they don't feel like they're caught in the middle of any conflict. It's been important to both of us that they feel safe and loved, no matter where they are. We don't argue anymore, at least not in front of them. Sure, we've had disagreements over the years, but we keep those discussions away from the girls. It's not easy to put on that act of cooperation, but it's what's best for them. Every so often, I'll think about how different things were before the divorce. How much simpler life was when we were all under one roof. But then I remember why we split, and the complications we'd been ignoring for years. Sometimes, I miss the family dynamic. I miss the routines we had, the little things like cooking dinner together or watching a movie as a family. The silence in the house now feels too heavy. It's not the absence of the girls, but the absence of the noise that used to fill the space. That sense of togetherness that we had even when we were drifting. But now, everything feels quieter. The house feels like it's always waiting for something. It's not just the absence of them, it's the absence of her. I didn't expect to miss the way things used to be, but I do, sometimes. Yet I've come to realize that things are different now. I can't afford to dwell on what we had. I have to focus on what's in front of me. The girls. My own life. It's weird how easily your world can shift after a divorce. One moment, you're a unit, a family, and the next, you're 2 separate lives, negotiating the new rules. I don't spend much time thinking about the past anymore. There's no point in trying to resurrect what's gone. Natalie and I are both figuring out the next phase of our lives. Our communication has improved over time, mostly for the sake of the girls, but it's also become easier. We don't talk about the things we used to, but we both agree that the kids come first. It's a balancing act, one I've gotten used to. There's still a certain distance between us. It's not hostility, but more like a protective barrier. We've been through too much to return to anything resembling friendship, but I think we've both learned to respect each other. It's strange, though. After spending so many years as partners, it's odd to look at each other now and realize we're strangers in a way. But I can't focus on that. I have to keep moving forward. For the girls, for me. For the life I'm building now. It's been about 4 or 5 months since Rachel and I met. At first, things were casual. We got to know each other, hung out, no expectations, no rush. But over time, I found myself looking forward to seeing her more and more. There was something about her, comfortable, easy. No drama, no pressure. It was a relief after everything with Natalie. We moved slow. I wasn't about to jump into anything. My life was already complicated enough. I had 2 daughters who I shared custody with, and they needed stability, not another change. The divorce had already been hard on them. They didn't need to meet anyone new yet. I knew how messy these things could get, and I wasn't about to complicate their lives further. Rachel understood that from the start. She respected the boundaries I set. We kept things private, nothing too public. There was no rush for her to meet the girls, no rush for anything really. We didn't mix the personal stuff with the co-parenting stuff. I wasn't ready to bring anyone into the kids' lives until I was certain about the direction I was headed. And it wasn't just about timing, it was about protecting them. I didn't want them getting attached to someone who might not stick around. I'd seen enough of that with relationships before the divorce. It wasn't fair to them. So, I kept Rachel and my family life separate. It wasn't about keeping secrets, it was just about pacing things properly. I wasn't sure how long Rachel and I would last, and I wasn't about to make any assumptions. We were both figuring things out, taking it one step at a time. She never pushed, never asked about meeting the kids. She knew where I stood. This wasn't about her fitting into some ideal family life. She was okay with the way things were. And I was too. It felt good, like I was regaining control of my life in small ways. Things were different, but they were good in their own way. I'd learned not to rush after the mess of the divorce, and Rachel respected that. For now, I was focused on keeping things simple. I didn't want to overcomplicate it, and I didn't want to make any decisions too quickly. The relationship had potential, but it was still early. I wasn't looking for a stepmother for my kids. I wasn't looking for anything that wasn't going to work long term. As time passed, Rachel and I grew closer. We still didn't talk about the kids much. They were a part of my life, yes, but this was still a new relationship. I wasn't about to bring someone into the mix without knowing how things were going to shake out. I didn't owe anyone explanations. I had my own life to rebuild, my own decisions to make. The kids were the priority, always, but my personal life wasn't something I needed to explain to anyone else. I wasn't out there flaunting things, but I wasn't hiding them either. It was just mine to figure out. Rachel understood that. She respected the pace, the space, everything. I didn't have to explain myself to her. It was clear from the start. She was patient, and that made it easier for me to navigate this strange in-between phase of life. The boundaries I set felt right, and Rachel seemed to understand that more than anyone else. She knew where I stood, and I knew where she stood. It was simple. It was good. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of everything on my shoulders. It was a typical morning, or at least I thought it would be. I was still in bed with Rachel when my phone started buzzing nonstop. The calls and messages came through in quick succession. Natalie. I ignored it at first, hoping it was just another random emergency that didn't involve me. But then, the texts kept coming, a constant pinging noise that wouldn't quit. I finally checked one, and it was clear, she needed to drop off the girls early. I wasn't expecting this. I hadn't been prepared for anything to change. Rachel and I had stayed up late, and we were both still half asleep when the phone started ringing. I wasn't about to get out of bed and start dealing with things just yet. I was trying to adjust to this new normal of co-parenting. Things had been going well, with just enough space to breathe. But then, it hit me, she was on her way. I quickly sent Rachel a text. My ex is coming to drop off the girls early. I'll take care of it. Rachel nodded, and before I knew it, she was getting dressed to leave. I didn't want Natalie to show up and find her there. She didn't need to know. But I wasn't about to hide things either. As much as I didn't owe Natalie anything, I also wasn't looking to make this situation worse than it already was. We had enough issues without this turning into one. I rushed to the door to greet Natalie, but she was already there, standing on the doorstep before I had the chance to open it. She didn't knock. She just showed up, and I wasn't prepared for it. The awkwardness was immediate. Rachel was just inside, still in her pajamas, and I could already see the tension building between us. Why is she here? Natalie asked, eyeing me with that accusing tone. She didn't even try to hide it. Is she really staying here now? I barely had time to process before I had to deal with this confrontation head-on. I wasn't about to let Natalie talk to me like that. She had no right. I stepped out of the doorway, blocking her view of Rachel. I wasn't about to let her make this a bigger issue than it already was. She's not staying here, Natalie. She's just visiting. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the judgment in her face. Oh, I see. So, you're already introducing someone to the girls? Just like that? Don't act like you have a say in what I do in my own house. I shot back, my voice firm. We're not together anymore. This is my life, my choice. You don't get to make rules about who I see or who I don't see. Rachel, now fully dressed, gave me a quick look before slipping out the back door, avoiding any more tension. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but it felt like the only choice in the moment. Natalie didn't need to be here with Rachel in the house. I didn't want to make this worse. You're unbelievable, Natalie snapped, stepping closer. You really think it's okay to bring someone into our kids' lives this quickly? You're so fucking selfish, Thomas. I'm not the one who decided to rip our family apart. I shot back, my voice colder than I meant it to be. So don't stand there like I'm the one who's fucking up the kids. This is your mess too. I'm not the one who's been all over the place. Her face twisted in anger, but she couldn't say anything back. She had no ground to stand on. We were done, and I was done letting her think she had any control over my life. You don't get it, do you? She muttered, but I cut her off before she could continue. No, I get it, I said. I get that we're not together anymore. I get that I'm the one who's been taking care of the kids, handling everything, while you've been off doing whatever the hell you wanted. You don't get to come in here and act like I'm the one making bad choices. Natalie stared at me for a second, then turned on her heel and walked away without another word. I felt a mix of relief and frustration, but I knew I'd handled it the way I needed to. There was no more talking around it. No more trying to please her. This was my life, and I was going to live it without her trying to control everything. I let out a deep breath, shaking my head as I walked back inside. I didn't have time to waste on this. The kids were going to be dropped off in a few minutes, and I had to focus on them, not whatever the hell Natalie had planned in her head. I checked the clock and realized I still had some time before the girls arrived. The whole thing with Natalie was a reminder of how much she still thought she could influence everything, even after we'd been divorced for years. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life to live, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, try to make me feel guilty for it. The door slammed shut behind me, and I felt the weight of the situation hit. The tension was palpable, and I could still hear Natalie's voice in my head, angry and accusing. I was pissed. I shouldn't have had to explain myself to her, certainly not in front of the kids, but there we were. She didn't get it, and I wasn't about to pretend she did. I stared out the window for a moment, taking a few deep breaths. My mind was spinning, but I had to focus. The girls would be here soon, and I wasn't about to let this mess drag on. When Natalie dropped them off, her face was still red, her jaw tight. She didn't say anything to me, but I could feel the cold air between us. The kids were oblivious, laughing as they climbed into the house, but I could see that the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't just the encounter with Rachel that had unsettled Natalie. It was everything, the way I was moving on, the way things were no longer her business. She didn't like it. You're making this harder than it has to be, I muttered, turning to walk to the kitchen, but Natalie followed me, her voice sharp. I'm making it harder? She snapped. You've already dragged them into this. They're going to see her, right? You're just going to introduce her to them, like it's nothing? I turned to face her, biting back the anger rising in my chest. I didn't introduce anyone. Rachel's not meeting them until it's serious. And that's not your business either. I'm their father. I get to decide how and when things happen. You don't get a vote anymore. She looked at me, clearly pissed but unable to form a comeback. I could see it in her eyes, the control slipping away. She hated that. She hated feeling powerless. The woman had always thrived on having a say in everything, but now, she couldn't tell me how to live my life. You can't just act like none of this matters, she said, her voice still shaky but gaining confidence. They're still processing this. They don't need some stranger around. I clenched my fists, trying to hold my ground. Rachel's not some stranger, and I'm not asking for your approval. What happens in my personal life, stays in my personal life. I'm not putting that on the kids. I'm doing what's right for them. Natalie looked at me, her eyes scanning my face as if trying to find something, anything, to use against me. But I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. She'd spent too long trying to control me. She wasn't going to start again now. This is a disaster waiting to happen, Thomas. You'll regret it. Not as much as you think. I shot back, a quiet confidence filling me as I locked eyes with her. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She was quiet for a moment, but her frustration was still there. You think you can just go on like everything's fine? Like the kids won't be affected by your new life? You're not even thinking about them. I'm always thinking about them, I replied firmly, stepping closer. I'm doing what's best for them. That means protecting them from drama, and that means not exposing them to unnecessary conflict. If that means keeping things separate for now, then that's what I'll do. For a brief moment, it seemed like Natalie was going to say something else, but she bit it back, realizing it wasn't going to go anywhere. Her shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her as quickly as it came. You're on your own with this, Thomas, she muttered, her voice cold now. I hope you're ready for the consequences. I watched her leave, her words hanging in the air, but I didn't care. She could threaten all she wanted. I had a right to move on, a right to make my own decisions. I didn't need her approval, and I sure as hell wasn't going to live in fear of what she thought. The moment she was gone, the tension in the room finally started to lift. I glanced over at the kids, who were sitting at the table, laughing and talking about their day. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. I wasn't going to let anything get in the way of that, especially not Natalie.